In the year 3681 BBY, the reconstituted Sith Empire came out of seemingly nowhere and laid waste to the Galactic Republic. Led by the unfathomably powerful and equally mysterious Vitiate, the Empire had been gaining strength for 1300 years. They were the natural evolution of what the government and society would look like if the Golden Age of the Sith never ceased. Vitiate, of course, had been alive during the days of Marka Ragnos' rule, and so he simply tweaked the design and philosophy for his own new Sith Empire. In that ancient era, similar to the Jedi who had a High Council, there was a Dark Council as well. One Dark Lord, and 12 Sith who advised him and represented other provinces. Vitiate knew that he would need a Dark Council for himself if he wanted his empire to run smoothly. This would give rise to a powerful, ambitious, backstabbing circle of evil individuals that kept the Sith Empire running during an almost 4-decade-long period of war. And today, we have decided to risk our very lives to expose these secrets. Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. In today's Holocron, we have gained exclusive access to the chambers of the Dark Council so that we can detail their origins, their roles, and what purpose they actually served in the larger empire. But while we were scheming for power, we discovered that there are spies within our midst, some who are sampling our knowledge and who have not yet subscribed. If you haven't already, you should join our empire by force crushing that subscribe button. Now, let us share with you our power. The origins of the Dark Council began many millennia ago, in the year 5000 BBY. Naga Sadow has just failed the Great Hyperspace War, and Vitiate has conducted the Ritual of Nathema, the ritual wherein he called 8,000 Sith Lords to his home planet and dominated their minds, after which he forced them to participate in a ritual that siphoned not only their force energy, but all of the energy of the planet of Nathema. This not only left the planet a stormy, gray husk devoid of all life and energy and any presence in the force, but it exponentially boosted Vitiate's own power and extended his life by hundreds of years. He left Nathema and returned to the Sith world of Korriban, where the citizens of the Empire were terrified and backed into a dark corner. Vitiate cast off his old name of Vitiate and declared himself the Emperor, the name that he would go down for the next millennium. He also declared that the Great Hyperspace War was a catastrophic failure, and all those who wished to survive the coming Republic-led purge were to follow him. With the last survivors of the ancient empire, Vitiate led them on an exodus into the unknown regions, promising to take them to a new, brighter home and future. But as theorized by the Jedi Mitra Surik, he did not simply take them straight there. Instead, he took the long route and spent an inordinate amount of time to get his people to their destination. So why would he do this? During this time, the Sith would have all been forced to turn to him, looking for salvation, support, and guidance. Their dependence on him would grow until he went from becoming a leader and a hero to a literal savior of their people. Eventually, they made it to the world of Drome and Kos, and by then, the Sith people saw their emperor as an all-powerful, all-knowing deity. It was here at last in the year 4980 BBY, Vitiate selected 12 of the wisest and most powerful Sith Lords to rule the Empire in his stead. He would then go on to issue them orders and to make the ultimate decisions for the wider Sith. But his attention was elsewhere, thus why he established the Council. Vitiate was not only scheming for the downfall of the Republic, but his own ascension to literal godhood. Vitiate lusted after the knowledge of true immortality, not a postponed death, and the glory of his people. In addition, he needed to prepare for the Sith Empire's return. He didn't have time to manage the day-to-day minutia of running an entire empire himself. So this was the reason and the purpose of the 12, the Dark Council, symbolizing the 12 Dark Jedi that ventured to Korriban hundreds of years prior. The 12 Dark Council members would act on orders from the Emperor and oversee the daily operations of the vast imperial civilization that was now currently only in its infancy. It was from this point where the Emperor retired into seclusion and pursued his studies and plans. And in his absence, the Dark Council were the rulers. Although the members of the Dark Council were the closest beings to the Emperor, he was anomalous to them. His absence stretched for the mere decades to centuries, and the entire generations of members of the Dark Council would never see the Emperor. Some even began to doubt his existence. There were only 2 times the Dark Council in their entire history had attempted to overthrow Vitiate. The first was actually in the first couple centuries of the Empire, when the Council banded together in hopes to usurp his rule. They were governing the Sith anyway. The Sith by the name of Darth Locus was the instigator, and the Dark Lady summoned her fellow Dark Council members to a meeting, convincing them to join her plot to destroy the Emperor. But when they gathered on the steps of the Imperial Citadel to confront Vitiate, it was said that all all 11 of them died instantly in a flash of light and power. Darth Locus herself was locked up within the depths of the Citadel by the Emperor, who tortured her until her untimely death. Thus would mark the end of the Purge of the Dark Council. But it would not be the last. The second purge came in the year 3950 BBY, where this time, 3 members of the council came together to form a conspiracy against their emperor. They had each discovered the terror and the horror of what had occurred on the planet of Nathema. The planet which the emperor had siphoned dry had become a void in the Force. All life, and even color itself, was drained from the planet. Any Force sensitive that stood long enough on the surface of the world went utterly insane, even Sith. It was an abomination to even the dark side, and they realized that their emperor was a madman, and so they sought to dethrone him. Darth Nihilus and Xendrix were the 2 that led the uprising along with 1 other Sith. And when the Emperor eventually grew suspicious, Darth Nihilus attempted to throw suspicion off of herself, but would ultimately fail. As a show of power, the Emperor summoned 9 members of the Dark Council to his chambers, 9 members who he knew were innocent and were not involved in the coup. The Emperor then promptly executed all 9 of them. He sent his personal royal guard to kill the 3 conspirators though. In the end, this would serve as a warning to the future members of the council. If they ever decided to betray him, they were all in danger. He viewed it as a complete sickness. So, they would hold one another accountable from now on, or the Emperor would obliterate them, even the loyal. But despite the precarious position of the 12 leaders of the Empire, a seat on the Dark Council remained the ultimate honor a Sith could achieve in this era. By the time of the Great Galactic War in the year 3681 BBY, a position on the Dark Council was the greatest place of honor, power, and influence in the entire Sith Empire. Many Sith spent their entire lives plotting their ascension to the Council. But with millions vying for only 12 available seats, the competition was cutthroat to say the absolute least. Even the powerful and cunning, the few who managed to join the council often served for only a few months at a time. Their lives were usually cut short by internal council member struggles, backstabbing, or even external enemies who sought to take their place. But having a seat on the council did not mean that it was a luxury. Each one had a specific job that their position was fashioned over. They were called the 12 spheres of influence of the Sith, which were essentially domains or departments that the members of the council oversaw. While generally separate, the spheres occasionally overlapped with one another, sparking disagreement and conflict between Sith who refused to cooperate. But ultimately, each Dark Council member is responsible for ensuring the success of their own sphere. Today we won't be going too deeply into the council members in this video, since we're mainly focusing on the functions, duty, and history of the council. But if each of the members of the council interest you, then be sure to let us know if you would like to see that video. Moving on though, in the year 3653 BBY, the Great Galactic War concluded with the sacking of Coruscant. This ultimately led to the Sith Empire calling for a ceasefire. They held Coruscant hostage and would force the Republic to sign the Treaty of Coruscant, a lopsided agreement that gave the Sith Empire control of nearly half of the entire galaxy. What ensured in the next era was an 11-year-long period known as the Cold War. Here, various border skirmishes and proxy wars would erupt between the Republic and the Empire. The Jedi spent this era rallying their ranks after their temple was destroyed, and to gain back their strength in the Force, and resolved to fight. The Sith, on the other hand, plotted their next steps for when the war inevitably resumed, and the Dark Council each managed their own sphere of influence, readying it for a new era of war. But again, the Dark Council plotted against the Emperor, using this time of relative peace to prepare their board. But what about their individual duties? The sphere of defense of the Empire was the first. This focused on protection through eradicating threats within and outside Imperial borders. The defense sphere was heavily involved with the military and the strategy spheres, with all 3 joining control to the Ministry of War and the Imperial military. The defense of the Empire was perpetually headed by the Sith Lord Darth Mar, the most senior member of the entire 12 Council. Darth Mar is a fascinating Sith Lord. He was unique, as he believed that the infighting and political games played by his peers were just as destructive to the Empire as the Republic was. And so Darth Mar took it upon himself to command the Dark Council with intimidating authority and stern wisdom. Next, you have the sphere of military offense, as it was directed the allocation of aggression, firepower, and the deployment of the Imperial military for war. Its job was maximum efficiency, The department was the one that oversaw the conquest for the first Sith Empire's supremacy, and it was the department that changed heads most often. First, Darth Vengine oversaw the department and had created an elaborate plan to restart the Great War and consolidate total power so that the Sith would rise to the top. But more importantly, so that he could become Emperor. But he would be killed by his apprentice, Darth Baras. Darth Baras was a deceptive spy master who favored cunning and sabotage to destroy his enemies. By the conclusion of the Great War, he had connections both within the Republic and the Jedi. It was said that his servants had infiltrated every major rank in the Republic, and he would attempt to call himself the voice of the Emperor in order to make himself the de facto ruler of the Empire, thinking that Vitiate would not take notice. This, of course, though, resulted in his swift death. He was eventually succeeded by the Sith Lord known as Darth Arro. Darth Arro, though, would also have a short tenure, as he would be killed by his greatest rival, Darth Malgus. But Malgus would not claim control and dominance over this sphere. Instead, it was passed to the Sith Lord Darth Arcus, who would hold the seat for a very brief amount of time, when he betrayed the Empire when he took part in the Revenites' cult. Finally, the seat was taken by Darth Malgus directly at the conclusion of the Cold War. Next, you have the sphere of military strategy, which of course is battle tactics, invasion, and the Imperial Conquest Consolidation Corps. This sphere was responsible for the strategies and plans which allowed the military offense and defense of the Empire to achieve total victory. In the Great War, it was led by the Sith by the name of Darth Azamin, but he would be killed by Darth Decimus, who organized a Jedi strike team to infiltrate his stronghold. Decimus ascended to the seat and orchestrated the invasion of Corellia during the renewed war with the Republic. His occupation of Corellia was nearly perfect, only to be foiled by the unexpected formation of a resistance by Corellian locals. Next, you have the sphere of Imperial intelligence. This oversees all gathering and dispersal of information within the Empire, as well as the management of its vast spy network. It also manages the many divisions of the Ministry of Intelligence, and was helmed by Darth Jadis. He was a Sith Lord shrouded in deep mystery, but he was recognized by his peers as brilliant, powerful, and enigmatic. No living being had seen his face beneath his mask, and all records of him previously being on the Dark Council had been wiped from all Imperial databases. A rumor persists, though, that the Sith Emperor himself declared that Jadis was second to him in power. However, this claim is called into question by the power feats of Darth Mar, who is also said to be second to none but the Emperor, as well as Malgus. And next we have the sphere of ancient knowledge. This was the sphere charged with discovery, preservation, and the deciphering of ancient Sith teachings and languages. They seek to strengthen the Empire, tapping into power buried in the past, where all the legendary Sith Lords and Kings would reside. Darth Thanaton was the one who would lead this sphere. He was in charge of the Imperial Reclamation Service to excavate Sith artifacts from both the good of the Empire and the good of himself. Thanaton was a proud Sith traditionalist and fought long and hard for a seat on the council. He always found ways of doing away with the up-and-coming Sith Lords that would challenge him, promising to make them his apprentice, before tricking them with excavation missions, sending them to die in spirit-infested tombs, ripped apart by the undead. Thanaton would even attempt the same strategy against Darth Nox, only for this to backfire. Nox would then take his place on the council towards the end of the Cold War. The sphere of production and logistics was responsible for the industries, economy, slave labor, and logistical support to the massive imperial civilization that was developed by Vitiate. The sphere dealt with the more practical running of the Empire's society. The Ministry of Logistics also reported to this sphere as well. Controlling this was Darth Voron, a pure-blooded Sith who earned respect by holding his position for many decades on the council. He was described as sophisticated and charming, utilizing his quick wit to severe implications in often contentious meetings of the Dark Council. Next is the sphere of expansion and diplomacy. It's exactly what it sounds like. They oversee the expansion of imperial borders and the Imperial Diplomatic Service. It's almost oxymoronic for the Sith Empire to have any sort of diplomacy, which is why it was usually leaned more towards the expansion side of things and not diplomacy innately. This was overseen by Darth Ravage, who concentrated his efforts on conquest that served his own interests rather than those of a greater empire. Next is the sphere of laws and justice, the group that imposed law and order on the Empire, punishing harshly any trace of defiance and instilling pride and respect in its citizens. They ensured that rigid order and efficiency was maintained and justice was served. Darth Mortis was the leader of this sphere. He held a balanced view, one that stated that the Empire's traditions and values were important, but relying too much on the past could compromise the future. This Sith also saw that the Treaty of Coruscant was upheld by the Republic. Next, you have the sphere of biotic science, which was concerned with the perfection and the destruction of the organic body, cybernetic augmentation, catastrophic plagues, the medical needs of the Empire, the bioengineered abomination through Sith alchemy all fell under the oversight of this sphere. It was overseen by Darth Acheron, who obsessively augmented his own body with copious amounts of cybernetics. He was universally despised by the Imperial military for his extremely cruel views on failure and sycophants. He often would kill his soldiers who failed him in any way, and disdained subordinates who attempted to gain favor, treating them with the same disgust that he did the incompetents. Basically, he hated you no matter what. Next is the sphere of technology. These oversee the creation of new gadgetry, superweapons, and cybernetics. Darth Mekhis presided over this sphere and constructed the Sunraiser installation. The Sunraiser was a giant space station that had the sole purpose of producing superweapons. This position also changed hands several times in the Dark Council's history. After being killed by a Jedi, Mekhis would be succeeded by Darth Hadra, who was killed at Corellia by the Republic. The fallen Jedi Darth Karad would ascend to the seat for a very brief period of time on the Council, before she too was bitterly killed in battle. Darth Asina was the final usurper of this position. Then you have the sphere of Sith philosophy. They upheld the Sith code, they spread anti-Jedi teachings, and enforced adherence to the dark side. Darth Aruk was the one who helmed this sphere, and he would be extremely busy attempting to eradicate the Revanite cult. They sought to dilute the Sith with heresy concerning Darth Revan's balanced approach to the Force, so he made it his personal goal to wipe out the so-called Light Sith from the Empire. And at last but not least, we have the Sphere of Mysteries, also known as the Keepers of Mysteries. As the name suggests, this sphere is shrouded in secrecy, and almost no one in the entire Empire or the Dark Council knows what work this sphere secretly conducts. However, they do not question its importance, as this is the one that the Emperor had a personal hand in. The only sphere. The only thing known for sure about the sphere is its controller, Darth Rictus. Publicly, the sphere was responsible for the protection of Imperial secrets and dangerous lore that was not to be shared with the greater Empire. Keepers would scour the galaxy in search of holocrons and other sensitive data to lock away. The sphere was also covertly responsible for the management of assassins and the removal of high-risk targets to the Empire. But this was the Dark Council, the 12 spheres of influence, and the members that controlled it during the highest point in the Sith Empire's history. It's interesting to actually observe the Sith Order function on a large scale, much like how the Jedi do. Of course, the Dark Council didn't just oversee the Sith themselves, but a whole government and a civilization. Unlike Sidious's rule, it wasn't just a galactic empire, this was literally a Sith empire. They were the ones on top, and they were going to ensure that everyone knew it. The purpose of the Dark Council was to use the wisdom and teachings of the dark side to run society the way the Sith envisioned that it should be run. They didn't feel a need to hide their cruelty. What the Sith did was far more simple. They dared anyone to question them when they made their final decision. As in the end, power was everything to the Sith. Our goal today was to outline the origin and the function of the Dark Council under Darth Vitiate. But again, if you would like a full detailed breakdown on each and every member of the Dark Council, please comment it down below and we'll begin our research. And tell us, which of the spheres would most interest you if you were among the Sith Empire? What would you choose? What seat on the Dark Council would you claim? Thank you so much for joining us in today's Holocron. I appreciate and love you guys, and may the Force be with you.